And now you are certainly ready for the final draft of your abstract realism watercolor painting. I am going to have you take your rough draft and write 5 things that you would do differently on your final piece, or 5 things that you learned from your first piece that you're going to apply to the larger final draft. So here I am placing the masking fluid first. I decided not to put masking fluid on the Sharpie lines. That was one of the 5 things I wrote on the back of my rough draft. And then after the masking fluid, I'm working on the background. Another thing I put on my rough draft was that I wanted to do more wet on dry technique and less wet on wet technique, because the wet on dry allows for cleaner, sharper edges, and I wanted sharper edges as opposed to soft edges. So just remembering to use the correct technique for your intention is going to be valuable to this assignment. Once you have your background layer dry, you can take your time taking off the masking tape and go ahead and add your details to your object. Again, I'm referring back to the 3 drafts that I did of my object all by itself so that I can really hone in and do the best I can with details and realism on my object. We want there to be a lot of contrast between the realism of the object and the abstraction of the background. So here I'm starting with cyan. There is the great debate of whether you should use the complement of red, which is green, as your underpainting, or cyan. I find that cyan gave me the most realistic shadow underpainting, so I use that, and then I'm using yellow for my highlight. Now it goes through 2 stages here, what I call the ugly stages. Underpainting is just that. It's what's underneath your final painting. So while my underpainting and ugly stages are drying, I return to the background and I build up some of my layers on the dry paint. So I'm sort of switching between ugly layers on my realism object and working on my background. Once I place that final layer or final 2 layers of red on top of my underpainting, I am quite happy with how it turned out. And then I'm continuing to revisit the background in different areas. So I hope you enjoy this project.